Imagine going to sleep, believing tomorrow would be normal. You laugh with your family. You make plans for the next morning. You walk through a city filled with lights, music, and people. And not once do you realize you are living through the final night of your life. That was Sodom. Nobody saw judgment coming. Nobody believed the warnings mattered until two strangers walked through the city gates. And before the next sunrise, fire fell from heaven. This is the story of the night Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Lot had lived in Sodom for many years. At first, the city seemed like the perfect place to build a future. The markets were rich, the land was fertile. Opportunity existed everywhere. Compared to the quiet life of the desert, Sodom looked alive, important, powerful. But over time, something inside the city began to change. Or maybe the evil had always been there, hidden beneath the wealth and beauty. Every day, the streets became colder. People no longer cared about one another. Violence became normal. The weak were mocked. Goodness was treated like weakness, and anyone who feared God was laughed at. Lot noticed it slowly, small things at first, then bigger things, until eventually even walking through the streets at night felt dangerous. Yet he stayed. Maybe because leaving felt impossible. Maybe because he kept hoping the city would change. Or maybe because comfort can make people ignore what they know is wrong. That evening, Lot sat near the city gates, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The air felt strange, heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Merchants hurried home before darkness fully arrived. Torches flickered beside stone walls. Laughter echoed from distant buildings. Everything looked normal, but Lot could not shake the feeling that something terrible was approaching. Then he saw them. Two strangers walking toward the gates. Their clothes carried dust from the road, but there was something unusual about them, something impossible to explain. The moment Lot looked into their faces, fear moved through him. Not the fear of danger, the fear of standing near something holy. The two men stopped near the entrance of the city, and suddenly Lot understood one thing clearly. These visitors could not stay outside tonight. Sodom after dark was not safe for men like them. Lot quickly approached and bowed respectfully. "Please," he said, "come to my house for the night." The strangers exchanged a silent look. One of them answered calmly, "We will remain in the square." Lot's heart nearly stopped. He knew what happened to vulnerable people in this city. He stepped forward again, more urgently this time. "No," he insisted, "you must come with me." Something in his voice finally convinced them. The strangers nodded. Lot led them through the streets while darkness slowly swallowed the city. People stared from windows. Shadows moved between alleyways. Some faces looked curious. Others looked dangerous. And all the while, the strange feeling in Lot's chest continued growing. Inside the house, Lot prepared food while his wife and daughters watched the visitors carefully. The strangers spoke very little, yet their silence somehow felt powerful, almost unsettling. Then suddenly, shouting erupted outside. Loud voices filled the streets. More voices joined them. Then came heavy pounding against the door. Lot froze. His wife gasped in fear. Outside, angry men surrounded the house. Torches burned in the darkness. Their shouting became louder, more violent. "Bring the strangers outside! Send them out now!" Lot's stomach tightened. The nightmare he feared had arrived. He stepped toward the door with trembling hands, while behind him, the two strangers slowly stood to their feet. Lot slowly opened the door just enough to step outside. Instantly, the noise hit him like a storm. Angry faces surrounded the house from every direction. Men crowded the streets holding torches high into the air. Shadows danced across the stone walls while the mob shouted over one another. Lot could feel fear crawling through his chest. "Please," he begged, trying to calm them, "do not do this wicked thing." But the crowd only grew more hostile. Some pushed forward aggressively, others laughed at him. One voice shouted from the darkness, "You came here as an outsider, and now you think you can judge us?" The mob surged toward the doorway. Lot stumbled backward, and before he could react, powerful hands suddenly pulled him inside. The door slammed shut. Then everything changed. A brilliant light exploded through the room. The entire house shook with supernatural force. Outside, screaming erupted instantly. Men clawed at their eyes in terror. They stumbled through the streets blindly, crashing into walls and falling over one another. The mob that moments ago seemed unstoppable now wandered helplessly through the darkness. Lot stared in shock. His breathing became uneven, because standing before him, the strangers no longer felt human. The atmosphere inside the house had completely changed. Heavy, holy, terrifying. Then one of the visitors finally spoke. His voice carried authority unlike anything Lot had ever heard. "The outcry against this city has become great before God." Lot felt cold all over. The angel continued, "We have been sent to destroy it." Silence swallowed the room. Even Lot's daughters stopped breathing for a moment. Destroy the city? The entire city? Lot's mind could barely understand what he was hearing. Outside, Sodom still stood. Fires still burned in the streets. People still moved through the city believing tomorrow would come. But heaven had already made its decision. The angel stepped closer. "Gather your family. Anyone who belongs to you must leave immediately." Panic rushed through Lot's body. He thought about the people connected to his daughters, friends, relatives, people who still had no idea death was approaching. Without wasting another moment, Lot rushed back into the streets. The city looked strangely peaceful now, almost quiet after the chaos. But the silence only made everything feel worse. Lot hurried through narrow roads until he reached the homes of the men promised to marry his daughters. He pounded desperately against the doors. "Wake up! You have to leave now! God is about to destroy this city!" The doors slowly opened. Sleepy faces stared back at him in confusion. Then came laughter. One man shook his head. "Lot, what are you talking about?" Another smirked. "You sound terrified over nothing." Lot begged them again. His voice cracked with desperation, but they only looked at him as if he had lost his mind. No fear touched their faces, no urgency, because judgment always feels impossible until it finally arrives. Eventually the doors closed, and Lot stood there alone in the dark streets, helpless, knowing the people he cared about had just rejected the final warning of their lives. By the time he returned home, the night was fading. A pale gray light was slowly beginning to rise beyond the horizon. Dawn was close, and the angels were waiting. This time, their expressions had completely changed. No more patience remained. One of them stepped forward urgently. "Take your wife and your daughters. Leave now." Lot hesitated for only a second. His house, his possessions, everything he had built in Sodom. Leaving meant losing it all forever. And for one dangerous moment, he stood frozen between obedience and attachment. Then suddenly, the angels grabbed their hands. Supernatural strength pulled Lot and his family forward. The door burst open, and together they ran into the fading darkness, while somewhere above the clouds, heaven prepared to unleash judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah. The streets were almost empty as Lot and his family hurried through the city gates. A cold wind swept across Sodom. The sky above them looked strange now, dark, heavy, as if creation itself knew something terrible was about to happen. Lot's wife kept looking behind them nervously. His daughters struggled to keep pace.
Fear had completely taken over their faces, but the angels did not slow down. Their voices carried urgency. Keep moving, do not stop, run to the mountains. The moment they finally reached the hills outside the city, the angels stopped. One of them turned towards Lot with terrifying seriousness. Do not look back. The words hung heavily in the air. Then the angels disappeared. Lot stood frozen for a moment, trying to catch his breath. Behind him, Sodom still looked untouched. The building stood tall beneath the early morning sky. Smoke rose from cooking fires. People were beginning to wake for another ordinary day. No one could see what was coming. Then, suddenly, the ground trembled. A deep rumble echoed through the heavens. Lot's daughters cried out in fear. The sound grew louder, louder, until it felt as though the sky itself was tearing apart. Then it happened. Fire exploded from the heavens. A blazing storm crashed directly into the city. The earth shook violently beneath their feet. Explosions erupted across Sodom. Flames burst high into the sky. Screams filled the air. Another wave of fire rained down.